Hey, this is Matt Cook, author of Conscious Movement, the Key to Releasing Pain, and creator of the Back Pain Miracle course. And today I'm here with Alyce Adams. She is the Kegel Queen, kegelqueen.com, one of the world's leading experts on all things pelvic floor, from incontinence to prolapse, weak pelvic floor, everything across the whole spectrum of pelvic floor. She's helped many, many women recover from all sorts of problems, and probably men as well, I understand. So we're going to have a conversation, and we're going to explore all around this topic. We're going to find out what the causes are, what the things are that cause it to remain in place, prevent the problem from being fixed. We're going to find out all about Alyce and give you everything you want to know about how to approach fixing it as well. So Alyce, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I love it.
Sure. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
So Matt gave me an introduction. What you didn't hear from Matt is I'm a registered nurse. I became a nurse in, gosh, it's so long ago now, 2001. I got my nursing license. And in the decade or so before that, I worked in women's health as a childbirth educator and a birth doula, non-medical childbirth assistant. I've been really focused on women's health my entire adult life. And the Kegel Queen story began with me becoming pregnant in my mid-30s, which was great. And my daughter is the best thing that ever happened to me. She's 17 years old now, and she's awesome and always has been. So I was thrilled to be pregnant and be having this baby, but my body was not especially thrilled about that. And during my pregnancy and afterwards, I started to have pelvic floor problems. So that looked like sneeze pee, which is super common and super annoying. So sneezing, laughing, lifting, that kind of thing, super annoying. And I also had symptoms of a prolapsed bladder. I didn't even know that's what those symptoms meant at the time until later on when I started to do my research. But I had this like really unpleasant, saggy gravity feeling and like this kind of gotta pee sensation. So if I wanted to go for a walk, let alone something like, jog 100 feet, really, really uncomfortable. And then I also had problems with sex. After my daughter was born, sex just didn't feel the same as it did before. And that was the part that really got to me, especially when I heard from my husband that it didn't feel the same to him either. It was devastating for me. And I just felt like, I didn't feel like the woman I wanted to be. I didn't feel, my confidence took a huge hit. And so I said to myself, like, okay, Kegels are supposed to help with this. They're supposed to at least help with incontinence. Like, I know my pelvic floor is messed up. What can I do? So I started trying to figure out how to do Kegels correctly. And I just found 100 different dead ends. Everything I found online was, like one paragraph, or it was maybe an entire web page, which is still not much. And then everything disagreed with everything else, and none of it seemed to make any sense. So I decided I was going to find out what actually works. And I talked to people too. Other nurses even didn't know. Nobody seemed to know anything. So I decided to go where people have actually really looked into this, which is in scientific literature. And I spent a year going to the medical library at the University of Rochester, where I live. It's a highly regarded medical school. And I just camped out in this library reading studies about what actually helps the pelvic floor. And I was a mom with a little kid, and I wanted it to be really simple. So I turned it into a protocol that was really easy and simple for me to do. And in 2 months, for me, it was 2 months, varies for other people, but in 2 months, everything changed. The sneeze pee was gone, the saggy prolapse symptoms were gone, and sex was suddenly much, much better. Right back to where it had been before or better. So it was really transformative, and I began to share this information then with other women. And that was 13 years ago now. And I've been able to help thousands of women from all over the world. So it's really, really rewarding. And to me, the biggest thing that is important about my work is helping women to avoid surgery. Because with prolapse in particular, with vaginal prolapse, surgery is not only the first option presented, but usually it's the only option presented to women by their doctors. And it is not the only option. So I really, really value helping women discover what they can do with their own body and with other resources and other techniques to help get better and manage their prolapse without surgery.
So when we had our pre-conversations, and I was just learning about this from you a little bit, what I think is, the perfect beginner information is the way you describe what the problem is. Like, and I know you've got like your model of pelvis. So yeah, I mean, I was hoping you can just like explain how, okay, there's the pelvic floor, there is the vagina, there is the rectum, there is the bladder, and how all these different things can prolapse, in different ways and create this like situation that you one day find yourself in, and you're like, whoa, this is a big problem.
Yeah.
I gotta fix this.
Yeah. So this, of course, is a pelvis, and it has the pelvic floor attached here. So a few landmarks. I always joke, this is a view you may have seen before. So for landmarks, here's the vagina. Here's the opening of the urethra where your pee comes out. Here's the anus. Importantly, here's the clitoris. And we'll start with a little fun fact. And then we'll talk about the things that can go wrong. But fun fact is your clitoris is attached directly to these muscles called the bulbocavernosus muscles. So by learning to use these muscles, learning to control the muscles and developing good strength and control there, women can actually move the clitoris independently, like you can learn to wiggle your ears. And I'll leave to your imagination what that can do for you, but it's a cool thing that every woman should know, and no one does. So there's your fun fact for today. So pelvic floor has 2 layers. We have this outer layer and the inner layer, which you can see maybe better from here. And you see it's a bowl of muscle. Of course, in real life, these are fully attached, but in our model, this part comes off. So it's this bowl of muscle, and it's attached to the pubic bone in the front, and it's attached to the tailbone and the sacrum in the back. So this is, for many of you who've been suffering with back pain and found Matt, you may have issues with your pelvic floor that are affecting your back.
Almost definitely.
And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you had a problem that started higher up, it could domino down and affect the pelvic floor. I mean, it's going to go both ways.
I can't imagine anyone with back pain not having a compromised pelvic floor in some way.
So a big part of pelvic floor function is stabilizing the base of the spine. So you want the pelvic floor muscle. There's a lot of connective tissue here, but it's really mostly muscle. And you want it to be healthy like any muscle. So not tight and clenched, not loose and weak. You want it to be that Goldilocks thing, right? Where it's just right. So we want it to be stretchy and supple, but also firm and toned, just like any healthy skeletal muscle in the body. So what we have going on in here, and this is a female pelvic floor. I actually don't do Kegels with men. The men who've benefited from my program benefit if they're in partnership with a woman and they have maybe a happier wife or girlfriend and also better sex. So this is a woman's pelvic floor, and what happens in the pelvic cavity, we have the organs are nestled in here like a jigsaw puzzle. So we have the uterus, in the front we have the bladder, in the back we have the rectum. And they're all right on top of each other and just like, sharing a lot of walls between each other, sharing some ligaments that support them. So those organs are supported from the sides and the top by ligaments, and they're supported from behind and below by the pelvic floor. This is about the angle the pelvis is in the body. We always kind of think of the pelvis as being like this, but in the body, actually, the angle is much more like this. So behind and below, the pelvic floor supports those organs. So one of the functions the pelvic floor does, as we said, is stabilize the base of the spine. So if the pelvic floor isn't working right, there could be issues heading up this way. Another thing the pelvic floor does, as we've discussed, there's some sexual function, not just these clitoris muscles, but a lot of the sensation of orgasm is contractions of the pelvic floor muscles. So again, if those muscles aren't optimized, you may not have an optimized sensation with orgasm. And the vagina gets its structure from these muscles. So there's a sensation issue there too. If the muscles are not firm and toned, the vagina will not be firm and toned. Then another job the pelvic floor has is controlling your elimination. So the pelvic floor, working with your brain and your bladder and so forth, the pelvic floor is really what decides when you release pee and poo and when you don't. That is a major quality of life feature, right? That we want that working correctly. And up to 50% or more of women will have trouble with urinary incontinence in their lives. That is a massive number of women. And the tragedy is a lot of them think it's just normal. It's an unavoidable part of being a mom, or it's an unavoidable part of being older. And that's not the case. But it's super, super common. So optimizing the function of these muscles can help you control your bladder, especially your bladder. Then the other thing the pelvic floor does, as I've said, is supports the organs physically, like mechanically supports the organs. So I'm going to take the outer layer off so you can see this better. So the inner layer here has this gap in the muscle. And what matches up to here is the vagina and the urethra pass through this gap in the muscle. When your pelvic floor is not working right, not in a good, if it's especially after childbirth, this can happen. It can go on for years. The urogenital hiatus, this gap can become too large, and the whole pelvic floor can lose tone and mass, and you're getting less support for those organs. So when you have that happening and you're losing support from the ligaments from the top and sides, you can have pelvic organ prolapse. And that means that one of the pelvic organs, the uterus or the bladder or the rectum, is literally falling out of its proper position and creating a bulge in the vagina. So it could be the uterus itself. It's not exactly a bulge, but the uterus itself could be low in the vagina, or you could have a bulge if it's the bladder or rectum pushing through, creating a bulge in the vagina covered by the vaginal wall. And where the urogenital hiatus becomes important there is the organs literally are falling through this gap in the muscle. And when the urogenital hiatus becomes smaller, when you do Kegels correctly, the prolapse doesn't go down as far. So for many women, one of the outcomes of doing Kegels correctly is the prolapse is not as far down when it is out of place, or that it's not out of place as often. And a lot of that is because of the size of this gap in the muscle. It's also because when you do Kegels correctly, again, I keep saying correctly because there are so many different ways to do them wrong. And in my experience, I can still, 13 years later, I can count on one hand and still have room for more the number of women I've spoken with who are already doing Kegels truly correctly. And this is out of thousands of women over 13 years. So when you do Kegels correctly, you're creating a more firm pelvic floor, you're creating a thicker pelvic floor. The pelvic floor sits higher up in the pelvis, and the urogenital hiatus gets smaller. So all of those things combine to create better support for the organs. And this can provide some relief with prolapse. I've had women, they're outliers, who say, I did everything and nothing changed with my prolapse. I've had other outliers who say, the doctors can't find my prolapse anymore. The typical response for most women is improvement with prolapse. And then there are a lot of other things we talk about that can help with prolapse besides Kegels. So there are a lot of different things you can do.
Yeah. So I understand. One thing I'm not sure about, by the way. So I understand that, you're going to have these organs that seem to be falling down. And I understand that there's these ligaments that are supposed to support them. And for some reason, these stop doing their job, like the ligaments. I don't know what could happen to them. Do they wear out, or is it because the pelvic floor was never supporting in the first place? So the ligaments are taking so much load, and then they're falling down, just so much pressure and squeezing through this hiatus. But can you specifically tell me about that? What happens to the ligaments?
Yeah, I mean, certainly if you begin to have prolapse and it's not addressed, the ligaments can stretch over time. It's an interesting question you asked about, if the pelvic floor isn't doing its job properly, does it stress the ligaments? I don't know the answer to that question, but I would say probably.
Yeah.
The thing about the ligaments, though, is there are so many parts of our lifestyle that don't support connective tissue health. So some of the things, your ligaments are made of connective tissue, just like so many other parts of the body. Sugar weakens connective tissue. Cortisol causes connective tissue to be weak and brittle. A big factor for women is that estrogen helps to keep connective tissue stretchy and supple. And after menopause, when estrogen goes down, connective tissue becomes more brittle. That's why we get more wrinkles as we get older, because our skin is made of connective tissue and it becomes more brittle. So I think a lot of it has to do with perhaps unavoidable changes of aging, although our lifestyle really has a big impact. Women can get prolapse whether or not they've ever had children, but certainly the changes of pregnancy affect the ligaments and put stress on them.
Mhm.
There also are ongoing alignment issues that may have an effect. So like if you're, and this, I mean, you know this as much as anyone, if you think about any body part, if you're habitually using that body part in a way that doesn't promote optimal alignment, you're going to end up with some problems. So like if you were habitually
Mm.
hunching forward, like if you spend all day at your computer and you're doing this and you don't consciously, consistently do some other kinds of movements, you can end up with contracted muscles. You can end up with stresses on the joints that aren't really the way we're built to handle them. And the same thing is true in the pelvis. So like a lot of women, I'm gonna see if I can, I don't know if my camera's gonna, yeah. So a lot of women are taught to, by their well-meaning mothers or dance teachers or whatnot, to talk. But what we want is for the ASIS, these, your hip bones right here and the pubic bone to all be in one vertical plane. But a lot of women habitually will hold the pelvis like day in, day out for decades. They'll just habitually have the pelvis at a different angle. And it puts stress in a way that we weren't really meant to accommodate.
Mhm.
So that's a really interesting question that I would love to see fully untangled. But it's not something, you know, because it's not something anyone in the medical industry can make money on. I don't know how much research there's going to be to really answer those questions, but it's a very, very interesting question.
Okay. So whatever the reason, you can find yourself in a situation where the organs are coming down.
Yeah.
Prolapsing. However, if you do the Kegels right, you can actually restore the tone to the muscles of the pelvic floor. And, you know, at first, when I first considered this, I don't know, maybe a long time ago, I thought, oh, okay, you're making the pelvic floor so that you can squeeze it and keep it firm. But actually, you won't even need to like squeeze it or really hold anything. You won't need to do some habitual chronic tension. You just have firm
Right.
tissue there that it can just sit on.
Right.
You'll just be
Exactly.
okay, right?
Exactly. And this is a major beef I have with a lot of Kegel devices. I mean, I'm not in favor of any Kegel devices at all whatsoever, because effective Kegels are done easily without devices. So why screw around with them? That's number one. But also, so many Kegel devices are, they're like weight based. So you're supposed to put this weight in your vagina and then like walk around holding it, training the muscles to clench. That's not healthy. You know, when you're in, we need to think of the pelvic floor like any other muscle in the body. You know, I train, let's say I'm going to do some curls, you know, I'm going to do some curls, and then I do that once a week, twice a week, and then all the other dozens of hours during the week, my biceps are firm and strong. I don't need to walk around with a dumbbell 24/7 in order to have my biceps do what they need to be doing correctly. So I think that's a thing also, that a lot of women coming into my program feeling that sensation, like it feels like something is going to drop out of you, that it, and I know that sensation, it's very unsettling to feel this. Like for me, it was like there was a bowling ball. Every time I took a step, there's this bowling ball between my legs kind of lunging toward the ground. It's a very unsettling feeling. And one of the things I'm always talking with women about in the program is you don't want to fight that sensation by clenching. it's normal to want to clench and hold it, but
Right.
really, we got to get the muscles healthy so they can do their job of simply being firm all the
Yeah.
time. Yeah.
Yeah. So something I like about the way you approach this is that you understand like this part of this conscious movement approach where you don't just simply mindlessly give it a squeeze and relax it. Like, oh, okay, squeeze, and then expect some change. You understand that this is something you do with your mind and your emotions and your whole body. Because
100%.
I mean, something I mentioned and you agreed with is, you have repressed emotional issues in the pelvic floor. It's a hot spot
Oh,
for
yes.
pain and tension.
Yeah.
And so can you talk on that? How, I don't know, about maybe how you guide women through dealing with these facts?
Well, unfortunately, the situation is that for many women, the degree of trauma associated with this region of the body is so extreme that it's really, for a lot of women, it's really important to get real like psychological help. So many women have survived sexual abuse or sexual trauma in some way. And we don't, it's outside the scope of the program to help women through what they need to process in that way. But a big thing that we do is just bringing awareness into the pelvic floor in the first place. There's a whole range of women's experience, and some women come into the program already conversant with their pelvic floor. They may have done incorrect Kegels before, but they've at least identified the muscles. There are some women, though, who really need to discover these muscles for the first time. And we are taught from childhood to cut off. We're taught to cut our sensation off, our emotions off. If you're a baby in diapers, you're taught, I pee or even poo and nothing happens. I'm just sitting in it and it's more comfortable if I cut off sensation. So even from tiny infancy, we're really training people to cut off from this part of the body. Then you move to, toilet training where there's often punishment, there may be shame, and then add the hundreds of cultural layers of meaning and shame and emotion around sex. And then there's birth. Many women have traumatic experiences giving birth. There is so much going on emotionally and mentally here. And sometimes I see women who kind of stall in the program, and I always advise, try to get some help to specifically address the emotional side with a professional who can really help you. But the main thing that I really try to help women with is just connect, discover this part of the body, and to really inhabit it. And the program is all about slow, conscious breathing, relaxation in a really deliberate way, contracting the muscles in a really deliberate way, which is the complete opposite from the most common Kegel advice out there, which is like do 200 Kegels a day anytime you find yourself at a red light or waiting in line somewhere. It's very, very different, very, very different approach.
Yeah, it's clear. Like the classic approach is just mindlessly, unconsciously, with no perception and no awareness, issue some squeeze order, vague squeeze order, and then just relax it, which is going to do
like
nothing.
Right. And these little squeezes, again, back to training other muscles in the body. If you want to build mass in your muscles, you need to train a certain way. If I want to build mass in my biceps, I could do this all day. I'm not really going to build mass the way that I would with a strong contraction, like with a dumbbell. And we need to do strong pelvic floor contractions, not just these like little brief squeezes, but sustained, intense contractions to do what we need to do there. And also sustained, strong, intense relaxation is equally important, if not more so.
Okay. Well, I totally agree with that. We could probably end it there. Is there anything you want to close on and just add, just for some acute wisdom for people?
Yeah, I just, I said it before, but the thing that I really want to shout from the rooftops anytime I get a chance is that there are so many other things you can do other than surgery. Surgery may have a place. If you've tried everything that's safer and cheaper and less invasive than surgery first, and you really want to try surgery, there's a place for surgery. I'm not anti-surgery, but it's inexcusable that surgery is presented as the only option or the first option for addressing pelvic floor issues, especially prolapse. And I just really want every woman who sees this video to know that that's not the whole world of possibilities. And there's so much out there, and you can find me. You can find out more, of course, at kegelqueen.com. But that's the main thing I really, really want people to know. And women don't talk about it, and it's okay to talk about it. That's another big one.
And if I can just add on the surgery thing, I imagine it's the same with back pain. Once people go and get a surgery for their back, they'll remove a disc or they'll fuse a disc together. And after that, you can't fix it because you can't move. And I imagine with the pelvic floor, they're going to put meshes in or just butcher it and just hack into it. Or they're going to do that with your organs and something. And after that, you can't do the natural method anymore. So it's such a huge risk. And surgery is just not the way to go. I don't know when surgery is the way to go, but I'm sure that almost always you should completely exhaust exploring all these conscious control of your muscles methods before going anywhere near surgery.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. Surgery really should be at the bottom of the list.
Bottom of the list.
And in this case too, I mean, there's Kegels and conscious movement stuff, but there are also lots of other things. But yeah, absolutely. You can't undo surgery. And in the case of the prolapse surgeries, you're more at risk. Any pelvic surgery increases your risk for prolapse, and they fail up to 50% of the time, those procedures. So
yep, similar. Is there anything you'd like to mention about your program? Wherever the audience is watching this, I'm going to put links. If it's on YouTube, there'll be a link in the description. If it's on one of my web pages, just look below. There's going to be links to resources from Alyce. But is there anything you'd like to mention about what your program is?
So just check out kegelqueen.com. It's going to be always evolving, and what we'll always offer is alternatives and safe, research-based approaches to help you with your pelvic floor issues. So check it out at kegelqueen.com. It's all there.
Beautiful. Okay, I mean, thank you so much. This is a fantastic explanation of the issue. So broad and so deep, like just explains so much for us. It's great content. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Matt. It's a privilege to be able to spread the word.
Okay. Thanks, Alyce. Have a great day. Talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.